I'm in Texas for work, so you'll have to forgive the poor quality. But I want to talk about why the media seems to have it out for PewDiePie. At least, as we talked about yesterday, mainstream media or whatever that means. Why do they always seem to have it out for Felix? And I think part of it is just because he's a public figure. Does the media have it out for Liam Neeson? Liam Neeson was in the news recently for that story he told a journalist. And if it hadn't been Liam Neeson, I don't think it would have been the news. But because Liam Neeson is a public figure, it just makes the news. By being a public figure, anything you say that might remotely generate interest, or that a media or press organization might think might generate some interest in their viewers, is going to get picked up. And PewDiePie is like Liam Neeson in the sense that he is a public figure. The second part of that, so that's just like an inevitable. And actually, I would like to say I'd be interested to see what happens when T-Series actually overtakes PewDiePie, because once he's no longer the top YouTuber, will that mean media covers him less? Because he's less of a public figure, quote unquote. He's no longer the number one on YouTuber says this, or number one on YouTube says that, or the biggest YouTuber does X or Y, or they won't be able to frame it as well because T-Series will be the number one. And so will there be less stories about PewDiePie simply because he's no longer the biggest YouTuber? Or will there continue to be stories about PewDiePie? And if so, I think that might prove to be a more insidious element operating with the media and their approach to him. But I think part of it just comes down to the fact that he's a public figure, the biggest YouTuber historically on the channel, and therefore any media company is gonna think that whatever he has to say, whatever whether it be remotely controversial or not, will generate interest for their viewers. Got a text, forgive me for that. But the second half I want to talk about is from working in media in New York. My experience is most people, most journalists, video producers, curators, whatever you may have working in digital media in New York, where most of media is based, don't really watch YouTube. They didn't grow up watching YouTube. They went to journalism school where YouTube wasn't really thought of as anything, and they don't watch YouTube as an adult. And so they're just not steeped in, I think, some of the history of Felix and the way he creates his videos and how self-referential they are, and how a little bit of insider baseball PewDiePie videos are for people that watch PewDiePie videos consistently and just watch a lot of YouTube consistently. Because I think you could take other YouTubers that are similar to PewDiePie in the sense that, in some ways, PewDiePie is a YouTuber for people that like YouTube or other YouTubers, and that people get a lot of the insider jokes. Just like H3H3 is kind of a YouTube channel for people on YouTube, if that makes sense. And I think if more people knew about H3H3 in the media, we're just going to use the big MSM mainstream media, they could equally paint a narrative of that Ethan and Ela Klein are alt-right, blah, 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 blah. But they don't, just because they don't know about H3H3, for instance. So I think part of it is that the fact that, they don't really have enough YouTube knowledge or have enough history of watching PewDiePie to really understand him in context, because they don't really watch YouTube. And so just the small things, get picked up. And when they do, they go back and look for a pattern, right? That's always it. I'm getting a lot of texts. What happens is, if you're in a newsroom and somebody mentions oh, PewDiePie said something controversial, yesterday in the video, then editor might be like, oh, well, has he said this before? Is there a history of this? Then people will be like, oh, well, if that's our frame, PewDiePie is this based on this one instance. Let's go back and look for other examples so we can build a story around it. Whereas if people in that newsroom were consistently watching PewDiePie, I think you would have more voices saying, no, that was a joke, or that was referencing, another joke within another joke, like he was making a point about Fiverr because he's done videos about Fiverr in the past. But there's just not that knowledge base in most newsrooms about YouTube or PewDiePie. And so you get a kind of collision of, one, he's a public figure, he is just going to generate views for any sort of media publication, and two, because people don't really understand him very well in modern media. The only things that hit their radar is when he occasionally says something controversial, and then an editor or somebody thinks like, oh, well, there's my frame. I'll base it around this little controversial thing. Let me go back and dig and see if I can find, examples. And they don't come to it from a place of full context and understanding to begin with. That would be my observations about like why the media seems to have it in for PewDiePie. I don't think it's like mainstream media or like traditional media is scared of YouTubers or going to take away, advertising dollars per se. There's that old adage that like never attribute to malice, which you can just attribute to incompetence. And I'll tell you the truth, guys, like the world, and especially like the media world, is made up of people no smarter than you on the opposite side of this camera. I mean, they're just people like you and I. And so I think I'm much more willing to attribute a lot of the poorly framed, if not kind of slanderous, libelous stories about PewDiePie on incompetence more than malice. Anyway, that's just a thought for this morning. Get my tea. Have a good one, guys.